We begin these 10 perfections. It's been interesting for me in terms of looking at different teachings in Buddhism, particularly in early Buddhism, because my training, as several people here too, primarily in Zen Buddhism, right? And the particular Zen Buddhism I practiced in came through the lineages and came through Japan to the United States. In my experience of Zen, which is a small, um, just a small corner of of a large landscape of practice, and I should say that because I know something of the practice of Zen from the community and the lineage and the way in which I have practiced. I remember being a little discouraged about Zen practice, and I went to a teachers meeting of a national meeting of teachers, and a lot of other Zen teachers there, like 120 or something. And a, a, a feeling that really struck me was, wow, Zen is very different in different places. With different people, they have a different style, a different understanding, and the way in which I've studied is one way. That's important in practice, is to not conflate my way with the way, particularly for us as for those who are teaching. But to understand that there are many different approaches. Now, in looking at these the ten perfections, it's not something I studied particularly in the Zen tradition. Right? In the Zen tradition, I would say that the realization and wisdom, gaining understanding primarily through meditation, through practice, waking up. There's a real emphasis toward that, and probably less emphasis on some of the earlier Buddhist modalities or ways to practice. That's one of the great strengths, of course, of the Theravadan school, the Vipassana school, these different lineages that are well represented at Long Beach. So we have these wealth of traditions, and it's interesting to look into different um, practice methods or understandings and find something new there. In our life, in our Dharma life, I find this as someone who's in the teaching seat, that it's vital to continue to inquire and to learn and to grow. To continually to disrupt what may be an understanding upon which one relies, and instead to let that go and to continue to expand into new areas. And some of these new areas we expand into can be very old, like in this case, the 10 perfections. Sometimes there's 6 paramis, sometimes 10. And we're going to cover them. They are. Let me just read the 10 that we're going to go through. Generosity, morality, renunciation, wisdom, energy, patience, truthfulness, determination, lovingkindness, and equanimity. So 10 paramis, 10 perfections. An early translation of the word parami, has a root in excellence. 10 excellences, or what would become perfections. Later in the Mahayana, parami becomes we use more commonly paramita, which is again can translate as perfection, but also means crossed over. So there's the transcendence within these perfections. So at the time of the historical Buddha, we know well that the historical Buddha taught many things, but beginning with the Four Noble Truths and then the Eightfold Path. And his original Sangha, the original practitioners, both monks and nuns, were home leavers, people who had left usual home life and become renunciate, become monks and nuns, had left and were then living in the sangha and living by different rules of the road than everyday life. Right? But those original teachings, understanding dukkha and suffering, and then the Eightfold Path, the way in which to practice within that reality, to unpack the human condition, to understand it, to refrain from those things that cause suffering, right? On the path to awakening. Later, after the time of the Buddha, some time later, something of a backstory forms more around the Buddha too, right? So we have like the Jakarta tales, but the tales of the Buddha's many different incarnations. Sometimes in some lineages and traditions taken very literally, and sometimes, depending on tradition, more metaphorically. But almost certainly, uh, beginning in the understanding that this was an extraordinary person and who had extraordinarily well developed qualities, which were rare in a human being. Rare to have so many blossoming qualities in one person. Many of us, as human beings, everybody we meet, we have our strengths or weaknesses. We might have a few good qualities which are very well evolved, and other shadow sides which we work with all of our life, the things that feel like hindrances. But in the later, again, sometime after the Buddha's passing, the human being leaves, and then what would become more the now represented in the statue becomes the perfection of many different qualities that he was said to have. In these 10 perfections, it begins with uh, generosity. Interestingly, there is a linear quality to these 10 perfections, and I encourage you to look them up. There's quite a lot of there's good information from a lot of good sources and free information that you can read about, that you can pull up on the internet if you want to look more deeply into this. But the first few, in this case, generosity, morality, and renunciation, are taken as something of the beginning point for the life of the practitioner. And then through these others, wisdom, the development of wisdom, patience, the practice of patience, the practice of truthfulness with determination through the practice life, then we can then appear as people who emanate loving kindness and equanimity, right? Who doesn't want some equanimity? That like comes at the end of these 10. So there's something of a linear progression through the perfections, the parameters, but we shouldn't just take it as a linear from one step to the other, but rather all 10 are in realization right from the beginning. Right? So there's a linear path to practice. We come into Dharma practice as a beginner, and after long practice and many years of meditation, then we learn and we embody aspects of the way. And you could point to some people and say that is a more experienced or advanced practitioner. So you can say that in a relative sense, but we also have to be careful with that, about putting ourselves in the category of beginner, or God forbid, expert. Right. So both those things are happening at once. I think it's interesting that we begin with generosity, or dana. Has For this organization, it's like, yeah, we certainly rely on dana and your generosity, and don't this isn't going to just become a dana pitch, with you. don't worry, right? It does rely on that. It relies on everybody's generosity. You mentioned before about volunteerism and helping. I think it was went today into preparing the food and the opportunity to talk amongst ourselves and on a chilly day in the park, that people showed up and did that. That's a wonderful manifestation of generosity right there. You know, generosity in the practice path begins with the decision to want to live our lives in a way which is of benefit to both self and other. Who doesn't really want to be a generous person or regarded as a generous person? I don't think anyone wants to be, I prefer that people considered me greedy and self-centered. Right? It's like we all embody those qualities too as human beings, right? We have that aspect in the human condition that we cling. We cling to what we think is enough. We want to make sure we have enough often before we feel like how much can I share because I need to take care of what I need for myself and my family. These are a natural an appraisal to make, but we know as human beings that we do cling. We cling to the material world and we cling to the people in it, right? Quite naturally. But we have this great fact of impermanence. So we see people are coming and going. Things are coming and going, right? To be a Dharma practitioner is really just to look at the nature of reality as it is and to see the truth of it. Whether it's we have that be a Buddhist lens or not. It's just looking at the fact of the matter, that we come into the world with nothing and empty-handed, as Tim brought up at retreat and thinking of Tim's talk at retreat. And then we leave it with nothing. We leave empty-handed. So what is it we actually ever really acquire in the world? But what can we actually cling to and possess and keep? Nothing. Really, ultimately, right? So look, to be generous is to actually to the natural result of seeing things as they are. Right? It's a terrible thing though when you look into the world, how much suffering there is, as much as there is now, as there was 2,500 years ago in India, as wars rage and equality spread, inequality, the fact of the wealth gap, the many different ways that we can point to how the worst aspects of human nature are still playing out on a global scale, right? We can really see that, and yet there is actually enough for everyone. The world can support everyone, and but because of this harmony introduced by the human condition, that basic fact is distorted. And so we have those with and those without. And as practitioners, we each one of us is fully responsible for the world. Right? That's like the kind of a hard truth of awakening. It's just like, oh wow, it's all me. It's all this is like the responsibility. The buck stops here. It's up to me how I live, how I manifest. And so for the way enterer of a practitioner, there is the decision point of, I wish this world to be better than it is, to be warmer than it is, to be more compassionate than it is. You see the suffering in our life and those around us and the world at large. And from a place of coming to grips, seeing that as it is, naturally we're moved toward wanting to be of some help and of wanting to be generous. And we can practice that. Again, like in our Dharma practice, we can say just provisionally, perhaps there's two ways to enter. And to enter by principle. To wake up to full realization, to be a fully alive, awake human being, to do that now. To awaken by principle, to grasp, to see things as they are. Right? But we find that as human beings, that enlightenment doesn't come easy, usually. It doesn't usually just fall in your lap the first time that you sit. All hindrances are dispelled, the veil of ignorance is lifted, and the magnificent heart center opens, and then you just a walking compassion finally came through the world, right? We realize that it's just like, actually, this is a pretty messy in here, and it's pretty messy out there, and there's a lot to deal with in life, and so we embark on the path of practice. Okay? And this is a vehicle in these perfections, one vehicle amongst many that says, here is a practice life that can be lived. Here are some qualities to which we can more than aspire, but that we can actually deploy. We can deploy our generosity. There's no barrier there. Right? Often we want to know how in advance. How can I be generous? Of course we know that there's obvious ways we can be generous with material things. We could be generous with money. Many of us might, you might be kind of coming up to Christmas time, and then you might be thinking about like, I mean, I'm talking about myself here. Maybe I'm projected, but at the end of the year, I always feel like I need to write a few checks to a few organizations that feel dear to me or feel like need some support, and then in some small way. Right? So there's like the generosity of some money or has some material goods. And some people, and I see them here represented on screen and in front of me, who are just extraordinarily generous in the material realm with money, for instance, right? And then maybe we go beyond that way of giving and into the giving of the most precious commodity that we can offer, which is the being generous with time. Right? The truly precious, you can buy a lot of commodities with money, but you can't buy more time. And yet that's our life, right? Our life is that. We are living as time-bound individuals. There's like a beginning and an end in time. And so there's only so much time. So the offering of our time to people, to the world, that is such a valuable and critical offering. I was talking with a dear friend over the last couple of days who I never talk to. I don't not never talk to, very rarely talk to. And I find that with some of my like closest friends, it's quite unfortunate. It feels quite sad. I don't talk to them often, but it's because I don't have to worry about them. In one sense, I know they're doing fine, and I know that friendship is there because those tight bonds were made a long time ago. And because in our life we only have so much time to talk to so many people. Like, you think about that in your life, like how many people and things we have to involve our time with, right? It's an act of generosity to come here on a Sunday afternoon. It's an act of generosity to the Sangha, to the person sitting to your left and right. Generosity takes like so many forms. Yeah, when we come to our core practice of meditation. It's a wonderful thing about, I love the simplicity of the name of our Sangha of the group, Long Beach Meditation. This is what we do, and this is where we do it. We do meditation in Long Beach. It's straightforward. You know what you're going to get. You can join from anywhere in the world gladly, thanks to technology, but we do meditation in Long Beach. That's what's happening. Now this is a path. Could be an underrated, or it's like, really, can we take our meditation as an act of generosity? But it really is. Like the Dharma path begins and ends in meditation. The whole of the Dharma path takes place within the sphere of meditation, whether that be sitting meditation or the many activities through our everyday life. And I mentioned earlier about how uh, what can get in the way of generosity often is clinging, is our self-clinging, our idea of what is enough, and our definition about how we're doing. Like, how generous can I afford to be, really? Right? That's all around like our circumstances and our causes and conditions. Very natural for us as human beings. But our practice of meditation is a radical act of non-clinging and an act of no fear. Right? Fear causes clinging, ultimately. We're scared to give or scared to do, right? Because there's a fear of loss in there, of giving something up. But in meditation, you can give it all up, even just for that 30 minutes. Have no fear, which is quite straightforward here in this beautiful space in Belmont Shores, right? It's like there's things are taken care of. This is a safe container, right? But in our mind, often, if you look into the causes and conditions that spin between the ears, there's all kinds of fears and ideas and approximations of reality. Or is that just me? My mind is always thinking about tomorrow and thinking about next week. Particularly at this time, it's like I'm going through there's some changes of thought, thinking about, well, if we do this, oh my God, what about that? And you start to kind of like trying to plot our way through life in order to be safe and to bring people along with us too. Right? And that there is some fear involved in that. It's a dangerous and difficult world in many cases, right? We're living in it as a human being. But when we come to meditation and we sit, then we sit as a Buddha, right from the beginning. Whether that's realized or not, that's what Buddhas do. Buddhas sit meditation. Dogen Zenji, the great Zen teacher, said that, about if Buddhas are enlightened, why do they sit meditation? He said, because meditation is the activity of a Buddha. Or another way to say it is because that's what Buddhas do. That's what makes them Buddhas. They sit still and they are just this. This is what we see the Buddha in wood behind us and each of us here on the screen or in front. For this period of time, sit as a Buddha and be generous by offering the world who you are, the truth of who you are. All of it. Just as you are, that's the offering that you make. That's generosity. Letting go of fear or of lack, which is always involved in self-definition and identity around self and other. We can loosen that up, disrupt that. That's what sitting does. It disrupts the identity or disrupts the fixed nature and the way that we understand self and other. Right? So we see that, wait, this self and other, who is the giver and who is receiving? Are those two separate things? Even when we set that up and say, I'm going to give this to that, that's a dualistic idea. We live certainly in the relative world where we're performing that from one to another, but intrinsically at the core, giver and receiver don't exist, are never truly distinct, are never truly separate. Again, we come into the world with you could say we come into the world with nothing, but it's also true that we come into the world with everything. Everything is provided. Always, all the way through. Such a shame that as human beings, we dumb that down into like the shiny objects that we can gather. Right? As human beings, we're still doing that, gathering the shiny objects and say, look how much valuable stuff I have in my hands. Okay? So our beginning on this path and these parameters is to have this open the hand of generosity, which wonderfully is both a practice and a principle. A practice in that give. It is that simple too. Give the gift of your time and your energy to those around you that need it. And then giver and receiver both benefit, right? It isn't that we give this out and then we have a deficit, but rather through the act of giving, through the act of being generous, we are supported in turn. This is like the unlocking of like how we could better live together, right? This is what Buddhism is. This is what these early communities around the Buddha tried to do, and many spiritual and religious communities have tried to do throughout time, to see the difficult, dark, negative aspects of the human condition. But we see through the way that we live, what you practice is contagious, right? It's like that in the room when we sit. The presence that's cultivated, the attention that's cultivated, it's contagious. That's what spreads. People spill into the hall, you gather some tea, and there's smiles and people talk together. It's contagious. That's what's modeled. That's these better qualities of interaction are fostered. Without guidelines, without precepts, without parameters, without a way to temper the darker side of our human condition, if we just let it run riot, it doesn't go so well. That's clear for us as human beings. So as Dharma practitioners, we commit to practicing a way which involves some voluntary restriction, which involves steering ourselves away from desire and these darker aspects of greed, and toward benefit, and to grow the good things and to share those one to another. But as we do that, the Sangha everybody benefits, and it can reach more people. We see the other side. People share hate, and that spreads like wildfire. That is also violence is contagious. All of these dark aspects are contagious too. The life, again, of a Dharma practitioner, whether you identify with that or not, or call yourself a Buddhist or not, right, is to foster the good qualities. And then over a practice lifetime, do the best we can with the karma that we are in order to perfect them as well as possible. These are 10 that we'll get into over today and these next 9 weeks. That's enough for a lifetime. In fact, pick 3. That's more doable, For the Buddha could do 10, but he was a big hitter, But even if you pick up 2 or 3 out of this thing and just say, yeah, I will practice generosity, patience, and truthfulness, and expand that horizon and really work in those realms, then your reach and your effect will be far and wide, powerful and lasting. In fact, not even 3, just pick 1. Right? But it does propel then on the practice path. It's like realizing who you are as you are, and then committing to a broader manifestation of the good qualities, and we'll work on those difficult qualities and temper those to the best of our ability in order that incrementally everybody in the world can benefit. And this is so important, because here we have maybe 40, 50 people and 30 or 40 people online. That's a lot of people. You could look at it as a small number or a large number. But as a Sangha, it's don't underestimate the Sangha of one and your own power. Your own power to reach people and to affect the world in a positive way. That's worth a lot. That's worth a lot. But yeah, if you have anything that you'd like to raise up on this topic of generosity as a question or a comment, it's so much. In 10 Sundays, we'll do the 10 parameters, but really, gosh, again, it's a lifetime. There's so much that could be said and shared.
I was really happy that you touched on fearlessness, having no fear, because I remember reading once that there's like 3 gifts that a bodhisattva can give, if this list is correct. That you can give material goods, you can give the Dharma, but you can also give no fear.
Yeah.
Simple. And that allegedly no fear is considered like the ultimate, the greatest of these.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about?
Just recapping for Zoom too. So, yeah, I think I read from that source, from one of those sources, that the aspects of a bodhisattva and generosity. So it was material things,
The Dharma,
the Dharma,
yeah, and then no fear.
and then no fear. Yeah, and the Dharma one is, in the teaching vehicle, it's always been that the teachings are priceless and also free, right? So you can't really measure them, and they're offered in exchange for the gift of dana or generosity. Maybe that was, and we covered material goods. Yeah, but the gift of no fear, I found that when in reading about that one, powerful and intriguing. The meditation is a vehicle for expressing no fear, because we can, in our own mind, we can look around and see everybody sat very still and quiet, and it looks pretty peaceful out there. But we know from experience that actually everybody's having their own world is being unpacked, and within that there are fearful things and difficult things. And the no fear aspect is to first, like, in one sense, to have the courage and the fortitude and the patience to allow that, accept that, and even welcome that, all of the difficulty and everything that is being unpacked. That's all our life. Those are the causes and conditions of the world. However the world is appearing, even between our ears, to just allow that. So that's one aspect of not shying away from and not trying to push the difficult stuff away and get to the good, happy place. But rather seeing it as it is requires an attitude of no fear, really, to really look in. And then the other aspect, perhaps, or another aspect of no fear is there is nothing to be afraid of. There is actually no division or no distinction. To have fear is to have two things, or a lack of something, or an idea of something missing. There's that in itself is something of a schism that appears in the mind. But intrinsically, what is there to be afraid of? Relatively, I got a few things to be afraid of, right? Yeah. So we practice on the cushion, allow the relative world of causes and conditions to be as it is without picking and choosing. That's the art of meditation. In seeing that, there is an alignment of relative causes and conditions with what we call the intrinsic. It's not two worlds, it's the same world. But it's a huge perspective shift where you can see the world as it is and you see it faultless. Faultless, but not an idea of what faultlessness looks like, but just a world without fault. Well, I hope I've done it justice amongst my peers and friends here and everybody to begin this series. Tim just gave me a little bit of a thumbs up there, so I'm feeling good about that. And Tim's going to talk on morality next week, so that could be a good one, right? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Brad with Long Beach Meditation. Your gracious generosity makes this programming possible. If you found this video to be of value, please consider making a donation here. If you'd like to watch more videos like this, click here. And if you want to stay up to date with Long Beach meditation, click here to subscribe. Thank you.